this week on Christian World News, safe at home. Meet the Chinese Christians who fled their country seeking religious freedom in America and how they narrowly escaped being sent back to China.
Plus, targeted for attack in northern India, Christians killed, churches destroyed, and thousands fleeing for their lives. Who's behind the deadly violence against the Christian community there?
And the birth of the State of Israel. 75 years ago, the Jewish nation was reborn. Nearly 2,000 years. See how it's now only survived but thrived in the midst of countless enemies. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. And we missed you, George.
Thank you. 6 months.
He's been gone for 6 months.
I know. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
You know, I did okay soloing.
You did a great job.
But I'm much better with you. So welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Let's do this. Well, after suffering religious persecution in China, an entire Christian congregation fled to find safety and religious freedom. For years, in South Korea and Thailand, they endured uncertainty and the constant threat of being forced to return to China.
Yeah, and now some 63 members of the Mayflower Church have completed their long exodus to freedom. CBN Asia correspondent Lucille Talusan reports on how God delivered them from one final challenge and opened the door to their new home right here in the United States.
The Mayflower Church congregation escaped the People's Republic of China in 2019 and headed to South Korea and then to Thailand. Stranded there while hoping for UN refugee status, all hope seemed lost when Thai immigration police arrested all 63 members for expired visas. Pastor Pan told CBN News he worried about what might happen.
I saw the Thai police is different from the Chinese police. If we were caught by the Chinese police, they will beat us. But sometimes I felt desperate because if we were sent back to China, it will be a lot worse for all of us.
Pastor Tim Conkling, who assisted the congregation in Thailand, worried about Chinese operatives possibly abducting them if they had been released from the detention center after paying the fine.
So what we have is a situation where the Thai government and the police are not able to prevent these kidnappings and abductions and being held for ransom. They would have still been in a very, very tenuous and possibly dangerous situation. God heard our prayers. Even something horrible like the group being arrested and thrown into the immigration detention center, that was still used of the Lord to highlight the difficulty of the situation that then moved the U.S. government to make a quicker decision to resettle them.
Pastor Pon said he was stunned with God's miraculous intervention.
I was surprised when the Americans said they already bought the tickets and we are to leave right away. It was sort of impossible. I am reminded of the verse in Job that says, I have heard about you, but now I see you. When I got on the plane and leave, I felt like I am dreaming. It reminds me that God is the God who is at work, and He will do what He promised.
Mayflower Church members received a warm welcome after landing in Dallas. China Aid, Freedom Seekers International, and other human rights organizations helped them gain religious freedom and asylum in the U.S. Pastor Pan's son, Paul, and the rest of the members of the Mayflower Church are grateful for the new life they now have in America.
The freedom now I enjoy the most is I know that I can finally go to an official school. I thank God for everything that He has done to all of us. He took us out of the detention center and lead us to America. And I believe He will let us live in peace here in America.
Lucille Talusan, CBN News.
Thanks, Lucille. Well, the Caribbean island of Hispaniola is home to two nations, the Dominican Republic and Haiti. In 2022, more than 8 million people visited the DR, making it the most popular tourist destination in the region.
That influx contributed to a spike in sex trafficking in the country. Sadly, immigrants fleeing the desperate poverty in Haiti are some of the most vulnerable victims. CBN's Chuck Holton has the story.
The Dominican Republic has an immigration issue. Conditions in Haiti have led to an increase in border crossings, and today, Haitians make up 25% of the DR population. We drove to a remote border crossing to get a sense of the problem.
This barrier between Haiti and the Dominican Republic is something the Dominicans call their version of the Trump wall. It was put here starting in 2019 to keep this flood of Haitians from coming into their country because it's been so expensive for them. But it's an ongoing problem, and they have to have soldiers out here in order to guard this fence as well, because otherwise people will cut right through it or jump right over it.
Haitians live in bateys, the poorest slums. Many work on sugarcane farms, one of this tropical country's biggest industries. It's hot, hard, and low-paying.
When the police come, we just have to run away.
The government is rounding up and deporting Haitians without the proper documents. Last year, authorities sent a record 162,000 Haitians back to their country.
We have nowhere to turn when people take advantage of us, or even if someone robs us. Finding a job is very tough. We have to look after ourselves.
There are an estimated 2 million undocumented Haitians in the DR, but this issue is complicated.
This is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Santo Domingo, and is completely full of Haitians. But as a matter of fact, many of the people that live here were born in the Dominican Republic. But because they're of Haitian descent, they can't automatically get citizenship in DR, and they don't have citizenship in Haiti either. And so they don't have papers for either country, and that leaves them in sort of a legal gray area that makes it very difficult for them to make a living.
Working under the table is often the only option, and many do so by serving the tourists who visit these white sand beaches each year. Unfortunately, foreign money combined with desperate poverty make the Dominican Republic a global hotspot for sex tourism, and over 20% of girls here are pregnant by age 18.
There's so many of these families put their young girls out into prostitution in order to just make a little bit of money because it's so difficult. And then the girls wind up getting pregnant, and so you got moms that are sometimes only 12 years old, 13, 14, and then they have an extra mouth to feed, so they kind of get kicked out.
Parakaleo Ministries is building this home for single moms right in the middle of the Batey outside Santo Domingo.
To bring them in and try and help them have a safe place and also train them for some life skills, so where they can get some work and so on too.
Pastor Simon oversees the program and leads the small church they started on the roof of this building.
Prostitution is a big problem in Dominican Republic. People like 12 years cross early, so we make this program for help them in this situation.
Fluent in Haitian, Spanish, and English, Pastor Simon does his best to help the members of this community better their lives without resorting to selling their bodies.
La Casa El Roy is a new program he has for the young people, especially the ladies, family education and social education for them.
However, as long as tourists are willing to spend money in the Dominican Republic in search of forbidden fruit, it will remain an uphill battle. From Santo Domingo, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming up, churches burned and Christians murdered. Why are members of India's Christian community under deadly attack? We'll answer that story in a moment.
Welcome back. Christians are under attack in northeast India. It's happening in the state of Manipur, where about 40% of the nearly 3 million residents are Christian. Some 34 churches have been destroyed in about a dozen villages. More than 50 Christians have been killed, and at least 20,000 have fled their homes. The violence was sparked over plans by the government to give privileged status to a Hindu ethnic group in the region. Recently, CBN's Mark Martin spoke with David Curry, president and CEO of Global Christian Relief, about who's behind these deadly attacks.
David, who's behind these attacks on Christians and their churches?
Well, there's some ethnic tensions in Manipur, which is in the northeast. It's a state in the northeast of India. But the attacks have really been driven. It's been an escalation by, I think, the central government, the BJP party, which has made being a Christian something that's not considered part of India. It seems as though their message is, if you're not a Hindu, you're not a real Indian. And this has allowed this escalation of violence against Christians and Christian churches. We have dozens of Christian churches that have been destroyed since May 3rd, when these riots began. And you have hundreds and thousands of people, I think we're almost up to 9,000 right now, who have been displaced, Christians who have been displaced because of this violence. Regardless of how they frame it, whether it's ethnic violence or anarchist, it seems to always be that the Indian government is overlooking and even in some cases encouraging violence against Christians in India.
Now, as you said, David, many Christians are displaced. More than 30 churches have been burned. How are they surviving right now?
Well, right now they're in shelters. Got some more video feeds. There's people shoulder to shoulder sleeping in shelters, makeshift shelters in some cases. So they're literally just on the run. And this happened just a few months ago in November, December, January in Chhattisgarh, a totally different area. That's why I say that we have to look at the pattern of behavior. In both cases, especially right now in Manipur, we have video evidence that shows the police assisting the rioters in attacking the churches. This is why you have to look at what they do, not what they say. And the central government and the local government seem to be in collusion with rioters that attack Christian churches and individuals.
Why is the national government fueling violence against Christians?
Well, India is a country that has lots of different languages, lots of different currencies. They've been very pluralistic in many ways. But since 2014, when Prime Minister Modi took over, he's been trying to force a one India vision, one religion, one currency. He's pushing his agenda forward. And that means that Christians and even Muslims have been attacked and pushed out in many cases. Christians are most affected in India right now because of the violence. And there's 65 million Christians there. Many of them are under severe persecution.
David, what are you hearing from the Christians there? How is this affecting their faith?
Well, their faith is being strengthened in this in many cases. In some cases, people are, just very frightened because the violence seems to come out of nowhere. It's as though they're using any political motive. The baseline of this particular attack started when there was a bill passed that was going to give a special dispensation to a certain group within India. And they turn around and decide they're going to attack Christians because of it. So there's always a premise that they start with, and they use it as a jumping off point to attack Christians. This makes for a very random existence for Christians in these rural areas and even in some more populated areas.
How should the U.S. and the international community respond to all of this?
Well, I've called upon the State Department at the highest levels to address this with India. And reality is this has been a massive escalation since this government took power in 2014. Hundreds of percentage points in jump in violence and attack on Christians. It's no accident. The State Department needs to address this. Friends don't let friends commit human rights atrocities. That's the motto that I try to remind them of. We need India. It's a beautiful country full of beautiful people. And I realize there are geopolitical angles to this with regards to China and other things, but the government has to stand up. I would also say this is a point where Christians in America and in the West need to stand up and speak out on behalf of India. Share these stories, share the pictures, no matter how difficult. We have some on our website to show the violence and how these attacks happen, and pray for Christians in India.
David, what is your organization, Global Christian Relief, doing to help these suffering Christians?
We have relief to these people who have been displaced, housing, shelter, anything we can do to help them stabilize and to be salt and light in the most difficult of situations. So people can be part of that. There are relief efforts that help directly these thousands of people who have been displaced.
All right, David Curry of Global Christian Relief, thanks for your work, sir, and the work of your organization. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Up next, the modern miracle that led to the birth of the Jewish state. See how this nation emerged from the shadows of war to become a light of the world. And welcome back to Christian World News. In Israel, Palestinian terrorists in Gaza have fired off more than 900 rockets at the Jewish state. More than 90% of those rockets at populated areas have been intercepted, but a few did get through, killing at least one Israeli. The barrages sent nearly 2 million citizens running for shelter, taking cover on the streets and even on the beaches of Tel Aviv. The rockets fired in response to Israeli strikes against Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror leaders and launch sites in Gaza.
Wow. Well, 75 years ago, a declaration signed in a Tel Aviv art gallery changed the world forever. Against overwhelming odds, the fledgling state of Israel was born.
Our colleague Chris Mitchell takes us back to the founding of the Jewish state and shows us how it put a tiny nation on the path to become a world power.
Here in Independence Hall on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the birth of the modern state of Israel. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people had a nation.
He chose the words, "We hereby declare the establishment," it says here, "of a Jewish state in the land of Israel to be known as the state of Israel." This was the birth of a Jewish state. As for all Jews, Ben-Gurion was standing here as the voice of 11 million Jews around the world who had no voice, who had no address, and nowhere to go to.
Isaac Dror's mission here is to ensure the story of Israel's beginning remains alive and continues to spread.
It was promised to us by God. We are the only people in the history of the world that live on the same land, speak in the same language, and believe in the same God more than 3,000 years.
From a biblical perspective, many see Israel fulfilling the prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, where the dry bones of the Jewish people come to life after 2,000 years of exile. Organizations like the Jewish Agency help lay the groundwork for that 2,000 years in the making Jewish state.
The Jewish Agency was the lead organization in establishing and giving birth to the modern state of Israel. The whole purpose of establishing the Jewish Agency was to, on the one hand, unite the global Jewish people and to bring the global Jewish people in front of the British mandate to be the organization that would lead and establish a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
To fully comprehend the miracle of the country's birth, consider that it happened in the shadow of the Holocaust, or Shoah in Hebrew, when the world learned how Nazi Germany murdered 6 million Jews.
When you understand that only 3 years after the end of the Shoah, the lowest point the Jewish people reached in its exile, we started our redemption process and we regained our independence after 2,000 years of terrible events. Well, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what a miracle is.
Even so, Dayan dispels one myth about the connection between Israel's beginning and the Holocaust.
Israel was not established because of the Holocaust. Israel was established in spite of the Holocaust. Israel would have been a much robust, greater, secure, successful country if there were additional 6 million Jews and their descendants in the world. But Israel is the guarantee that there will be no other Shoah for the Jewish people.
Now, after 75 years, Israel maintains its safety and security with one of the most powerful militaries in the world.
Then it was small units of very patriotic people, some of them Holocaust survivors who just came off the boat from Europe, put on IDF uniforms and joined battle and defended Israel in 1948 against 6 Arab armies. Today, we are a highly organized, developed, and well-funded military, perhaps the strongest in the region, that enjoys a significant technological advantage over all of our enemies.
Israel is also an economic miracle. This tiny country with less than 10 million people has the highest concentration of new businesses per capita in the world, earning it the nickname of Startup Nation. John Medved, founder of Our Crowd, a venture capital investment company, showcases these accomplishments at his annual Investor Summit.
This is what Israel is supposed to be doing, right? If Israel wasn't the startup nation, so what are we going to be? Okay, I'm sorry, this is our destiny. Our destiny is to create. Our destiny is to, fix the world. And we're just a little people, we make a lot of noise. But I think that most Israelis, whether they wear a yarmulke or they don't wear a yarmulke, view this as a spiritual undertaking, that we're doing this not just to make money, but to do good.
Yet throughout its history, Israel has faced nearly insurmountable odds. Just hours after Ben-Gurion declared the state, 6 Arab nations tried to drive it into the sea. While it survived, Israel would be challenged again in the 1967 Six-Day War and the 1973 Yom Kippur War. After thousands of years in exile and 75 years as a country, Israel stands despite enemies within, along each border, and beyond.
It's a modern miracle. The rebirth of the Jewish state against all odds, a people that were left for dead, that had been dispersed to the four corners of the earth, and you saw the ancient prophecies fulfilled, where you had the ingathering of the Jewish exiles, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty in modern times, against all odds.
Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and now Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer tells CBN News this miracle can be seen unfolding throughout the nation.
And you're seeing that happen wherever you go in Israel, whether it's in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and you saw all the ancient history, and then you see the startup nation. You go north, south, east, and west. Israel is a modern miracle. It is the greatest miracle of the 20th century and maybe the greatest miracle of the last 2,000 years.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
At the top of the show, I mentioned that George has been gone for 6 months. Brother, where you been and what you been doing?
Yeah, so I went to go and take care of my biggest supporter and one of the most ardent viewers of CWN, my 91-year-old father, who on January 17th got promoted to heaven. And so I had the privilege to spend some time with him and to take care of him in his last days here on earth. And so it's been wonderful, but it's been great experience, great journey, but great to be back with you on this set.
Well, we have missed you.
Thank you.
Very sorry about your dad.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So glad to have George back with us. Thanks for joining us. God bless you. We'll see you next time.